Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've spent many years working in the general aviation industry, basically working with private jets, the crews, and the principals. Because of my location, we get a lot of political activity every 4 years, as the various candidates get out and start traveling around. It's in large part a non-event. They are on standard biz aircraft and not much is required in terms of special handling. That all changes when one of these folks becomes the candidate. Now they are rolling around on commercial jet aircraft 737/MD-80. They have a bunch of staff and requisite protection to go along with it. Okay, no problem. Our crew was very experienced, did a lot of large aircraft sports charter and serious VIP work. We had all the appropriate equipment to service these airplanes, i.e. stair trucks, baggage carts, belt loaders, and so on. We also knew how big these airplanes are and how to maneuver and park them on a ramp. Believe it or not, at this level, aircraft handling is an art. There is no straight line or jetway to pull up to. You basically get one chance to get it right. In this last election cycle, we were getting the challenger to the throne very regularly, like 1 to 3 times a week. Okay, a little bit of a hassle, but from an airplane standpoint, no big deal. By and large, everyone involved was responsible and friendly. The issues came about due to the fact that the members of the protection detail were always changing. This was especially true of the agents in charge. My understanding from talking to them is that they were on a set rotation schedule to keep everyone fresh and on their toes. As far as we were concerned, a simple confab with the SAIC about the details for the day was sufficient. We would be clear on what they needed and we would handle the aircraft accordingly. This usually revolved around how many cars, buses, equipment trucks, and so on that they had and where we were going to put them. This usually revolved around how many cars, buses, equipment trucks, and so on that they had and where we were going to put them. Remember, along with this, we're also trying to handle a constant flow of regular biz jets coming and going. So coming up with a mutually beneficial plan was pretty key. All is well and good until one day SAIC Richard Cranium is on the case. He wasn't particularly old, but he reminded me a lot of Sheriff J.W. Pepper, Louisiana State Police, from the Bond movies. You know the type. Alright, everyone stand back, I'm in charge here. The other rammed lead and myself just looked at each other in an oh great kind of way. It was either this guy's way or the highway. He didn't want to hear or discuss anything about anything. Okay, fine, whatever. So the plane comes in empty to pick up the candidate. We get the plane fueled and serviced. 2 sets of truck-mounted air stairs, 2 baggage belts for loading luggage into both holes. The whole deal. Plane is ready and waiting. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So the press buses and a luggage/equipment truck arrive. No problem. Everything is going well. Get them on a plane, bags loaded, cool. Now I don't know what this guy's last assignment was, but this wasn't AF1 where all the principal has to do is get out of the car and get on a plane and go. This candidate was always coming with several cars, staff members, additional luggage, promo stuff, and so on. Nothing unusual or unexpected. Well, once we had the plane serviced, this SAIC took it up 1,000 notches with the I'm in charge bit. When he got the call that the motorcade was 15 minutes out, he decided that he was going to quarantine the entire ramp and make it a sterile area. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The ramp was now off limits to anybody who wasn't approved, and none of us were approved. As we were very familiar with this particular operation, I calmly tried to inform him that the principal always had additional items for the plane and so on. Nope, everything's on a plane. They just need the candidate. Okay, I think it might be wise. Nope, sterile area. No, not authorized. Stay out. I'm in charge here. Okay, buddy, you've got it. With a big smile. I had really had it with this guy at this point. I could see the hole he was digging for himself, and felt our team had done all we could to avoid the common problems. So sure enough, the motorcade arrives, 10 cars/SUVs, luggage, boxes of promo stuff, and other crap. And this is where we would usually be standing by to unload the cars and get everything on the built loaders and into the cargo holds. As we weren't there, the folks in the cars just dumped it all on a ramp, realizing that nothing was happening. The protective detail now starts grabbing the stuff and trying to figure out how to get it on a plane. Meanwhile, 10 of us were just standing there in our glass-lined office watching, smiling, loving it. Right about then, SAIC Richard Cranium starts losing his mind. Not only did his guys have to try and load the plane, he was now realizing that the plane still had equipment all over it. He rushes into the building and starts getting on one of our CSRs about how we're messing him up. And finally, I walk out to the desk and calmly yet somehow patronizingly ask him what the problem is and ask if I can help him. Guy is literally foaming at the mouth and starts going off about the bags and the trucks and the equipment and why are we all standing around. At that point, I smiled politely and reminded him that he had personally restricted the ramp and ordered my staff out of the area. Of course, I'm here to help him. And if he wants to reconsider his prior position, I was confident that I could find some staff to finish loading the aircraft and remove the equipment so that they could depart. And he just glared at me and said, "Do it." 2 minutes later, the plane is secure, the equipment is gone, and a plane is pulling up. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. This happened 2 years or so ago. I'm a project manager in a multinational furniture firm. We do a lot of contract jobs, hotels, offices, resorts, and so on. Mostly in Europe, but with some overseas contracts every now and then. In that particular job, I was working in the US, supplying furniture for a private business center. I was there to supervise installation of our goods and to ensure that everything went smoothly from delivery to installation. At the beginning, the general contractor was great. The general contractor's fitters were contrary to any exception and previous experience, skilled and cooperative. The project was just 1 week or so behind schedule. Pretty common and recovery plans were already in place to meet the deadlines. Everything was going great. One of our shipments, the only one yet to arrive in the US, was held in customs and delayed a few days due to mistakes in the paperwork. This was definitely our fault, but as is common in this kind of projects, all the parties were expected to adapt a bit and try to work around similar problems, as long as it does not imply excessive delays or costs. This was particularly true there, since the client strongly pressured everyone into collaboration after a subcontractor played some dirty tricks. I was let go. Time came to install the wall units on room 2. The project consisted of 8 main rooms and several secondaries, the ones held in customs. No big deal. We discussed with a general contractor the possibility to move ahead with room 3 instead, but unexpectedly the general contractor's superintendent firmly refused. He insisted that a delay in installation effectively did not allow him to proceed with the rest. He claimed that general contractor was due monetary compensation from us for lost working hours and forgiveness for the week-long delay from the client. I was astounded. But the client was literally fuming after this meeting. Other subcontractors warned me that the general contractor superintendent's idea was to blame us for the delay because his boss was asking questions and he needed to take some heat off his tail. He was also trying to recover some extra money on the project since his team made some mistakes on purchases and he was running over budget. On a subsequent meeting, things quickly became hot between me and the general contractor superintendent, with him making a scene about the delay in a very unprofessional way. Luckily, I just got news the last shipment was ready to deliver in 2 days, and I told him so. He cut short, yelling, "Just deliver your stuff and get the hell out." And now I'm pretty tired of the whole deal. Our job was practically done with the last shipment coming in. I was ready to fly back home in 2 days for a short holiday, and this jerk deserved a teaching. You sure, Superintendent? Just do it. We take over from here. Sure thing, Chief. I replied and cut the meeting short with a fake phone call. On a business lunch, I came to an agreement with a client not to allow the general contractor to pass any cost on us for this whole situation, since we were evidently not at fault. I asked for copies of the transcript of the meeting, got them, and started my plot. Fast forward 2 days, Friday morning, I board a plane for a day-long flight, turned the phone off. I had previously set an out-of-office notice on my email with no backup contacts. While waiting for security and boarding, I made some calls, taking final agreements with our US logistics partner. Then I was ready for a dozen hours of business class pampering high above the Atlantic. I landed with over 50 calls from Superintendent, his boss's boss, a few voicemail messages, starting with, "You jerk," and gradually evolving into a broken voice plea of, "For God's sake, please, just stop." You see, the superintendent did not know we had all our goods already delivered and custom cleared, sitting in a warehouse 50 miles out of town. That Friday morning, he got our stuff delivered, all of it, all at once. Several trucks full of large wooden crates, effectively filling every possible storage space on a site and requiring part of the parking lot for temporary storage. Our logistics was explicitly instructed not to allow any missed delivery, and in case just drop crates on a tarmac. I had a truck crane brought in for unloading. To speed things up and further state my point, we were not kidding around. All the documents were done with a single bill of lading, so the superintendent signed unwittingly the single proof of delivery while the first truck was unloading, and just before the rest showed up. From then on, to do any real work, he would have to move around several large crates to free some space. He had full liability for any possible damage, and eventually he had to pay the landlord the fine for unauthorized use of the parking lot, because we had the signed proof of delivery and could prove he accepted the shipment in full. Unplanned but not unwelcome, Saturday night a storm was supposed to hit the area and he had to scramble to find some warehouse and some trucks to move the crates in a covered space. He had to do most of it in overtime and at his company's expenses. Having finished the deliveries, my job was effectively over, saving a good few $1,000s in future travel expenses. I got thank you messages from several subcontractors who had the chance to bill the general contractor for the extra time needed to move around the crates. We got some explanations to do toward the client. We discounted part of the supervision cost from our bill as a sign of goodwill, and ultimately he agreed that the general contractor deserved it, and the PM was very collaborative in pushing the blame to the general contractor superintendent. Never heard from that general contractor or his superintendent anymore. Was working as an expat oil company senior staff geologist and de facto exploration manager, but without the increase in pay nor authority, just increased stress levels. In the Middle East for a Southern European construction company's oil and gas concerns. The general manager was a complete C-word, full of himself because he worked for one major oil company his whole benighted career as an engineer. So obviously he knows everything about geology, geophysics, petrophysics and so on. He didn't and doesn't. His management style, if one could regard his screaming and infantile fuming as a style, could be described variously as inept micromanagement or management by objection, who berate and degrade the entire staff in meetings with partners, which made everyone terribly uncomfortable to see such a lack of decorum and professionality. Screams of the whole office could hear over mundane idiocies, such as lack of coffee pods in the kitchen, or why 6,000 meters of pipe had never materialized even though the unpaid invoice still nestled on his desk. In a multicultural office, he would rant and rail at top volume about Arabs, self-important and self-entitled expats, and damn jingle bunnies. Those engineers and others from the subcontinent region called the firm the worst oil company in the Middle East. At least here we agreed. Not only a racist, but a sexist, misogynist, general misanthrope, and a complete and total waste of carbon. He got in my goodie locker one day after a well was drilled, but yet to be tested or completed, based on my prospect and recommendation, and looked somewhat dismal on the logs. Truth is, the well came in for over 8,000 POPD, and it was a Jake Clegg and Lois Pitt from whom he always took kickback loggers that had screwed over the logs, and he absolutely refused my insistence to relog the pay zones. I was called just about every nasty name in the oil patch handbook, right down to the part where he told me my alma mater were a bunch of idiots for my granting me my 3 petroleum geology degrees. After 26 years in the patch, I decided that no job was worth this and laid plans for a quick, early, and entirely unannounced departure. I quietly related the fact that I was doing a runner to some of my other expat compatriots over drinks. One Thursday evening, I was greeted with a revelation that several read most of the other expats there were one, thinking the same thing, and two, if I left, they were gone as well. We carefully laid our plans. The company provided housing, i.e., paid a ridiculously low monthly fee, so we had to live in a cheap housing or sucked it up with our families and ponied up additional funds to live in decent villas. So we all gave clandestine notice to our respective landlords about our imminent departure and as they kept it on the QT. Since they were paid by check 12 per year and were already compensated, they were both delighted that they had already been paid once and that they could rent out our abodes after we left for essentially double rent. Cancellation of internet, water, and power were taken. A quick email, print, the automated response, and carry it with you if the border guards gave us any crap when we bungered off. Since we were all Western European, Canadian, or American, we decided to book a block of business class tickets, as well as our contractual due to London on the same British Airways flight. In fact, with families and all, we booked the entire business class section. We all had been in country for years and years, so arranging packing and shipping or storage of our belongings was a snap. We were all members of the move every 18 months to follow the money crowd, so this was the easiest part of our master plan. No one leaked a word of all of this, but some of the locals in the company somehow sensed the change in the decorum of the company's daily activities. When one really doesn't give a crap, the stress levels magically evaporate down to near zero. I wondered aloud, what was going on? We confided in a few of them. These were not just colleagues but personal friends in many cases, with a proviso that they would tell no one under the pain of bacon sandwiches. They were all Muslims and they thought the threat hilarious. Like I said, many were and are still close personal friends. The weeks dragged on and school was about to let out for the summer, with most expats bugger off for 1 to 3 months to escape the stupidly hot and humid Middle Eastern broiler session. So the usual requests for contractual time off were made, and all roundly rejected by her, Mr. Jerkhead General Manager, and life proceeded on its merry way. Finally, Liberation Friday arrived. Weekends being Friday and Saturday at this time in this country, we contracted a local carrier and had a bus rented to pick up everyone and take us all to the airport. Luggage tagged and shipped off to the balls of PA's incomprehensible baggage handling inner workings through chicken, customs, and passport control without so much as a sideways glance. We all invaded the English pub after hitting the duty-free one last time. We toasted each other on a job well done and best soon forgotten. Sitting in business class waiting on takeoff, quaffing my third double vodka and bitter lemon, I did a quick tally. The company was, in this one instance, losing its senior staff geologist cum exploration manager, senior geophysicist, senior petrophysicist, senior geomodeler, senior reservoir engineer, drilling engineer, operations geologist, logistics manager, senior surveyor, 3 secretaries, wives of the aforementioned senior crowd, and the HSEQ manager. A small company, total 50 or so total employees, could withstand the loss of 2 or maybe even 3 of their senior level employees, but not this mass emigration. My good friends whom we left behind regaled us for months regarding the situation in the office come Sunday. Bloody Sunday. Once the realization of what had happened, the GM went completely off the rails, totally crab-housed, and completely berserk or variations on that theme. The first glimmer of recognition of the severity of the Rotom bill of jeers about to descend upon him were when all calls to various abodes were answered with, "That number is no longer in service. Please check blah 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 blah." Emails went unanswered, however, our GSMs were still working. Although we all plugged her jerk's head number, though we still allowed text messages. Text 1, "Where are you? Why aren't you at work?" was just the beginning. In the words of Khan Noonien Singh, we let him eat static. Text 2, "Where are you? If you don't get your butts in here immediately," and other such impotent threats. "Yes, please. I'd love another drink." Rising panic ensued. Text 3, "This isn't funny. Come in and we will act like this never happened." We all sat on a plane anticipating touchdown. By the time we hit London, it was 7 a.m. local time but 11 back their time. Her jerkhead's GM called an emergency meeting of the remnants of his staff, all locals, and demanded to know what they knew about this huge display of insubordination. "Don't know. Never heard a word. Why? What happened? And where is everybody?" were the responses. Jerkhead blows a gasket and immediately sacks everyone left in the office. Unfortunately, all that were left were a couple of T-boys who are always in demand and a bunch of locals. Due to the country's assassination plan, it would be easier to fly a fully loaded 747 through the hull of a bagel than it would be to dispose of a local indigenous worker. Long story short, he couldn't and was instantly reported to the proper ministry in charge of such matters, as one of the secretaries was kin to the Minister of Employment Affairs. It's all wasta, nepotism in this part of the world. Final damages. Loss of 10 plus senior employees. Fines of over 5,000 reals every day due to improper business practices. Firing locals. Loss of 2 drilling rigs due to lack of personnel and inability to provide work as per contracts, and cessation of drilling of 2 active wells. Into the hole, so to speak, about $3.5 million each, and 10 or 12 field development wells, so long cash flow. Loss of a 3D seismic contract worth approximately $3 million. Adios exploration program. Loss of A rating, meaning you take a backseat to all who try and tender rigs, seismic crews, and so on. Good luck sourcing oil country tubular goods, login or completion services, and pretty much all field-related activities. Loss of face with several ministries. No small item here. Huge importance is placed on competence and perceived amiability. Au revoir field development plan acceptance or seismic contract approval. Loss of 6 locals to the National Oil Company. Figured if expats deserted this amalgamation of idiocy masquerading as an oil company, they should bail as well. Ultimate temporary closure of the office, cessation of all field activities, payments of 150 to 200% on defaulted loans and contracts, and loss of several lucrative pipeline rights-of-ways and transfer contracts. They had to continue to pay the still employed locals, basically sending them a check for sitting at home playing Xbox, and loss of 25% of their acreage due to non-fulfillment of contracts with the government. Last I heard, our GM jerkhead is thrashing around South Texas trying to sell some sort of jumped up and shady oil deals with companies who have seen their own projects quashed by plummeting oil prices. Funny thing is, he keeps running into people, now on the other side of the desk, who both know him, and in 1 or 2 cases, actually worked for him. One receives a special gold-plated schadenfreude when you lean ever so slightly forward and tell him to F off. And don't let the door hit you on the way out. You might suffer brain damage. Used to work in private security. Rent-a-cop/bacon pits jokes go here. When I was first hired on, I thought the company was fairly upstanding, yada yada, because the owner and I would bullcrap a little about our respective military careers. A guy who used to be in pararescue can't be that bad, right? First year was relatively normal security work, mostly fixed post. Think Walmart door greeter, but with a badge and handcuffs. And general, I'll tackle you if you steal things, but otherwise, I'm just a breathing security camera stuff. About a year in, I finish all of my qualifications for armed work and get assigned to patrol. Patrol is basically private police. Companies would hire us to make rounds and respond to things at their locations. Mostly apartment complexes and mostly noise complaints or occasionally towing off cars and such. But occasionally managing residents during a fire or breaking up disturbances. The company handled pay in a kinda wonky manner. Twice a month, on the 1st and 15th, we got paid for 2 weeks' worth of work. And every now and again, it seemed like whenever they felt like it was getting too far behind, we'd get an extra paycheck slipped in with our normal one. I got my first paycheck 5 weeks after starting. And there was a point where we were receiving December checks in February. Pay rates were determined by the type of work. Entry-level staff made $7 an hour, more advanced made $8, and armed paid $10. Raises were available on top of that. For the record, I worked there for 3 years and never got a raise. And the 2 people I know who got raises each got 25 cents an hour after 4 years. Also, all of this was during a $5.15 minimum wage. Patrol required armed officers but paid as advanced. I was also guaranteed 42 hours a week on a set schedule, 3 12-hour days, a 6-hour day, and 3 days off. So most of us didn't really complain. Moving up into patrol taught me a lot about the company that I didn't know. I figured the owner was a little sexist. Ex-military types tend to be. But the depths of his sexism caught me a little off guard. And then there is a racism. I'm Latino, but I look white. Because I avoid sun like a plague and got my bone structure from my white mother's side. Though my surname is a dead giveaway. There is a state in Mexico to which I'm apparently related. Must be a distant relative on Apulita's side. I was apparently good enough to be on patrol but not promotable, even though I worked my butt off, even though supervisors routinely recommended me for promotion. For some reason, or the fact that we had one black guy on staff and he was fired for something that other people got away with, the female officer who was assigned the easiest shift because it's all she can handle, and this way it's obvious I'm trying to work with the women. Those are as close to verbatim quotes as I can recall. For the time he held a contest between patrols for excellence and cancelled it after 2 months. 2 months in which it happened that the female officer won once and took second once, and the Mexican dude won once and took second once. Between those 2 months I made an extra $30 in gas cards. For frame of reference, here are a couple of things why dudes did that they didn't get fired for. Hitting 120 miles per hour in a company car in a 40 mile per hour zone. After over a year of doing 20 plus over, carrying a gun without a proper permit, blatant sexual harassment, admitting to skipping stops on a route, and just sending the business a false statement, writing racist slogans on the front of the company provided taser cartridges. Hold Me Down is the one I remember. Tasing people without proper justification, sleeping on a job, working drunk, and so on. I also learned about how they screwed over clients. This company pays for 12 hours of continuous patrol between their 3 properties, but the owners want more money, so that route also covers 5 apartment complexes and handles cash drops for a couple of stores. Another business pays us $1 million a year for 5.5 hours per weekend and 7.5 hours per weekend night, approximately $450 per hour. And that Rude jumps off property like clockwork every night to take care of 3 to 5 other properties at specified times, leaving that client without their only security at key times. This group of apartment complexes pays for 1 hour on property per night, might get half of that if the night is slow because of the workload. And then he decided to screw over his staff more. Patrols offered a salary that was 10% less than the minimum legal salary, with a strong implication that if we wanted any hours at all, we'd take it. Once we were all salaried or gone, things shifted over to 48-hour weeks. I did the math at one point and realized that if I watched the movie at the theater and ate twice at fast food on every day off, it was still cheaper for me to not work than to work because of gas and food while working, considering I walked about 12 to 15 miles every night as part of the patrols, which requires a fairly brisk pace, which requires calories galore. But if you were scheduled off and they called you in, you either accepted the extra hours or you got chewed out. And if you made a habit of saying no, you get written up for anything they could think of. Then one of my colleagues got into an accident at work. He was hospitalized for like 9 days and ended up making a full recovery. But he was in a company car. So according to the company, he was responsible for paying the $2,500 insurance deductible. I'd had it at that point. I borrowed some money from my mother to talk to a labor attorney. Best $200 I've ever spent. Attorney gave me 3 pieces of advice. 1. If there is a problem with the way we're being paid, talk to the labor board. 2. My colleague was not on the hook for the car. That's why the company had insurance. It wasn't our fault that he was too cheap to spring for a lower deductible. 3. Document everything but keep my name out of anything. I passed word to the injured colleague about the insurance thing, and he lawyered up pretty much immediately. His family had enough money that he didn't have to work. I also made a not-so-anonymous phone call to the state labor board, asking that they not reveal it was me. 3 weeks later, I'm in the office handling post-shift paperwork when the rip comes in. I get the hell out as fast as I possibly could. I didn't want to be there for that whole thing. Fast forward about 6 months, and the labor board has finished their investigation. Turns out that the salary was in fact too low to be legally allowable, but also that our positions were not legally eligible for salary anyway. So all of those 40 hours /60/72 plus hour weeks were full of overtime. Unpaid overtime on which we were owed interest. Also requiring patrol to be armed but not paying them armed rates wasn't legal. Based on the employment contract, any work for which we required that license required we be paid the rate associated with that license. Also, the twice a month you're paid for 2 weeks of work thing isn't legal either. So we got several oversized paychecks covering back pay, plus others covering interest, which had to be noted in the check stub as interest on back pay. The labor board rep couldn't do anything about the ways they were screwing over their customers, but she did have someone she could call. Someone she should call. Someone she did call. A couple weeks later, that investigation started. I don't know all the details. I left during that time to start some higher education, but a few months later, they sold the company to someone else. And I heard through the grapevine that part of the reason was that they lost several contracts, and all that back pay pretty much wiped out their savings. I got something like $8,000 in back pay, and there were another dozen patrol officers in that time frame, so I figure around $100K total went out just to patrol. And apparently there were some discrepancies in how they managed fixed post staff as well, and they had to move to a smaller house. The rumors also said that after the sale, the new owners renegotiated all the contracts, including getting a few that the previous owners had lost to being shady, and somehow they are still profitable, even after giving raises and whatnot. It's almost like the previous owners had just been trying to milk everyone for as much as they could get. Oh, and an aside, I got to know the manager of that business that paid us $1 million a year pretty well afterwards. She neither confirmed nor denied that 1 million figure. So take it with a grain of salt, but if it's true, she manages the most affluent shopping center in town, which includes a restaurant where prices aren't on the menu because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. That one contract would cover all the expenses of all the patrol. The owners always seemed really intent on keeping her happy. I made sure that we knew not to tell her we left the area for any reason except end of shift. And they always had money to spend on things like a large house in one of the more affluent areas, and a private school for their daughter, and buying a new gun or two. Higher price stuff where the name stamp adds $1,500 to the price every couple of weeks. So the year before COVID hit the US, I started working for one of the major airlines at my local airport as a baggage handler. I absolutely love the job. I just enjoyed being around planes from the ground level. When I started, there were no full-time positions available, so I was working part-time 6-hour nights 5 times a week. The way it usually works is each gate has a lead. The person with extra training to do the load planning and scanning and towing the planes to the runway, as well as guiding them in, and a few baggage handlers. Now, I had only been there a few months, but I was working hard and showing that I was a team player. I decided I was gonna try to become a lead, even though they usually want you to work a year or so as a handler first. I was confident and ended up passing the training course with ease. The problem was they had no availability for more leads, so I was put into what was basically an on-call lead kind of thing, where they could upgrade me for the day if they needed more leads. Now, whenever they upgrade you to lead, even if it's for a single flight, they have to pay you for the extra $1.75 per hour leads for your whole shift. Remember, I work 6-hour days, so $10.50 is a cost to make me a lead for my shift. Now, for a few months, everything was great. I was a part-time baggage handler, but I was working as a lead for my whole shift, every shift, and I was loving every second of it. Something about towing huge planes full of people to the runway was just awesome to me. Enter everyone's favorite virus, good old COVID-19. Within months, the airline industry is tanking pretty hard as nobody wants to travel and get stuck somewhere. Supervisors are being told to cut costs everywhere they can, which makes sense given the circumstances. Cue up the night of my MC. It's maybe 11 p.m. and I'm on till 1 a.m. Supervisors have sent a large chunk of workers home, and those of us left are being sent all over the airport to cover the flights we still have coming. I get a call from the office that assigns your flights, and I'm told to go grab a box and a walkie. The stuff needed to plug into the plane to take to the flight deck. They tell me to head to the gate, the flight's landing in 5, and to just put in my request for lead. When asked to be a lead, you put it in on the company app and a supervisor approves your pay raise for the day. I get to my gate, check the load coming out of the plane, brief the handlers on what's coming down, and we all get to our spots to bring the plane in. I see the plane coming down the lane to my gate, and at the same time my zone supervisor drives up to my gate and asks me to come over. He then tells me something along the lines of, "Hey man, we can't upgrade you to lead right now. We just can't swing that extra expense right now." I respond with, "Okay, so who's going to bring this plane? There is nobody else on the gate is lead trained, and supervisors are not allowed to do any of our work because of the union rules." He then tells me he's going to go find another lead to bring it in and to just assist him when he arrives. So I'm like, sure, whatever. Now it's important to know that the planes have very tight metrics for how long it can take to bring a flight in, unload and reload for the next flight. The flight pulls up to the edge of my gate and comes to a stop as there is no lead there guiding them in. So the flight just sits there waiting and the entire gate crew are also just standing around waiting. 20 minutes go by and my radio I still have on me goes off and the office is pissed. They want to know why the hell I'm holding this flight short and not bringing it in. To which obviously I reply with, "What do you mean?" Ex-supervisor told me they couldn't afford to pay me for lead work today and that he would find someone else. He then asks me if I can please just bring it in for him, and I said sorry. But if you're not willing to pay me to do the lead work, then I'm only going to do the handler work I am being paid for. As it turns out, they sent too many leads home this night, and the ones they had were all busy on flights already. After about 45 minutes, a lead from 2 terminals over finally strolls up, and we're able to unload the plane as usual, but at 45 minutes, the plane sat idle at the gate, cost thousands in extra fuel plus overtime for flight attendants, forced into mandatory overtime from the situation, not to mention all the passengers who were pissed off from the extra weight, who all were some credits with the airline for the trouble. I also came to find out the supervisor's bonus was based on flight turn time, and this 45-minute short hold probably cost him his bonus and a write-up. Edit. I feel I should also add that as per the company rules, only leads can bring planes in, so bringing in the flight for him while not being designated as a lead would technically also be against the rules. Let me set the stage for a story that's as infuriating as it's inspiring. A tale I picked up while working at a veterans hospital. It's a saga that showcases a clash between duty, law, and the sheer entitlement of a homeowners association gone rogue. This narrative isn't mine, but it's been passed around enough that it feels like a collective reminder of what happens when greed meets its match. Our protagonist is a soldier, someone who, before their life took a turn toward the battlefield, lived a life much like yours or mine. They resided in a peaceful neighborhood, their home governed by an HOA. Like any good neighbor, they made sure their dues and taxes were paid in full, never missing a payment. Their home was their sanctuary, a place of peace in the chaos of life. Then came the call of duty and with it, deployment overseas. Now I think in their absence, life at home will proceed as usual. The soldier had set up automatic payments to ensure their HOA fees were taken care of, believing in the system's integrity. Little did they know the foundation of trust they had built would crumble in their absence. Over a year passed in service to their country, and upon their return, they expected to find everything as they left it. Instead, they were met with the unimaginable. Their home, their sanctuary, had been seized and sold by the HOA, the very association that was supposed to safeguard the community's welfare had betrayed one of its own. The shock and betrayal ran deep. How could this happen? The shock and betrayal ran deep. How could this happen? Well, the HOA, in a display of unfathomable greed and entitlement, had found some pretext to declare the soldier's home abandoned or in violation of some obscure unmet condition. Despite the soldier's diligent payment of fees and the legal protections in place for deployed military personnel, their home was gone. But this soldier was not one to stand idly by in the face of this nonsense. Upon learning of the legal seizure, they reached out to the Army Judge Advocate General's Corps, initiating a battle of a different kind. The response from the HOA to the first letter sent by JAG? A dismissive silence. Ignoring a direct inquiry from military legal representation was the first in a series of miscalculation that would lead to their downfall. As the legal proceedings began, the extent of the HOA's violations came to light. Not one, not two, but 11 federal laws had been broken in their actions against the soldier. The courtroom became a battleground where the soldiers' fight for their home transformed into a symbol of resistance against systematic abuse of power. The ruling was eventually a landslide victory for the soldier. The judge awarded them $1.5 million in damages, the immediate return of their home, and laid down a stark warning. Failure to comply would result in federal prosecution. But the victory didn't end there. The soldier's home was indeed returned, untouched and waiting. As if the HOA board had known all along, their scheme was doomed to fail. The aftermath was catastrophic for the HOA. Ordered to dissolve by the court, the board members were forced to sell their properties, likely to cover legal fees and the damages awarded to the soldier. Whispers of their subsequent imprisonment for federal violations added a grim footnote to their tale of entitlement gone. Whispers of their subsequent imprisonment for federal violations added a grim footnote to their tale of entitlement gone awry. So the next time you hear about an HOA overstepping its bounds, remember the soldier who fought back against impossible odds and won. Their story isn't just about reclaiming a home, it's about upholding the values of fairness, respect, and legal protection for all, especially for those who risk everything to protect those principles.